This did not arrive randomly. You did not stumble into this moment by chance, algorithm, or coincidence. When a message finds you at the exact moment you are able to feel it rather than just hear it, that is a signal. Not of luck, but of readiness. Something in you reached the frequency where this recognition could land. And the moment recognition happens, the breakthrough phase has already begun. Not in the future. Not later. Now. Reality does not respond to words, wishes, or effort. It responds to identity. And identity only shifts when consciousness is ready to see itself differently. That is why certain messages feel invisible to most people but unavoidable to you. They do not appear until your internal state matches them. This is the law. The field mirrors your inner configuration, not your desire to change it. When you encounter a message like this, it is not calling you forward. It is reflecting back what has already changed within you. Recognition always precedes manifestation. Before anything rearranges externally, it is first acknowledged internally. This is why breakthroughs do not announce themselves with fireworks. They announce themselves with a quiet, unsettling clarity. A sense that something is clicking into place without effort. A feeling that you cannot unsee what you now see. That is irreversible. Once consciousness recognizes a higher alignment, it cannot return to the previous configuration. This is not motivation. This is activation. Certain messages only appear when internal readiness is reached because they are destabilizing to an old identity. If they arrived too early, they would be rejected, mocked, or ignored. Not because they are untrue, but because the nervous system protects coherence. Now, however, your internal state has softened its grip on what you were. Control has loosened. Allowing has increased. And in that space, the next signal can arrive. This is how the universe communicates. Not loudly. Precisely. You are not here because you are searching. You are here because you are available. Available to see, to feel, to allow a deeper recognition of who you are becoming. This is not about being special. It is about being aligned. When alignment begins, life stops feeling random and starts feeling inevitable. Events, emotions, and realizations line up not to test you, but to confirm you. This is the beginning of coherence. Something has already shifted. You may feel it as restlessness, anticipation, or a strange calm beneath uncertainty. That is the old identity loosening its hold. You do not need to force clarity. You do not need to chase certainty. Recognition is doing the work for you. The only requirement now is presence. Stay here. Stay open. Let the mirror show you what is already true. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Breakthroughs rarely arrive wrapped in calm. They announce themselves as disruption because disruption is the mechanism of reorganization. When an internal frequency shifts, reality must rearrange itself to match. That rearrangement is not gentle at first. It looks like chaos because the old structure is losing coherence. What you are experiencing is not failure. It is movement. And movement often feels unstable before it feels clear. Most people have been conditioned to believe that alignment feels smooth from the beginning. That is incorrect. Alignment often begins as friction because the old identity is still trying to maintain control while the new frequency is already active. Control creates resistance. Resistance amplifies discomfort. Allowing, on the other hand, creates flow. This is not philosophy. This is mechanics. When you attempt to control a shift that requires surrender, the nervous system signals distress. When you allow the shift, the same energy reorganizes as relief. Emotional turbulence is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a signal that something is changing faster than the mind can narrate. Emotions are not obstacles. They are data. Expansion indicates alignment. Contraction indicates misalignment. Neither is a problem. They are instructions. The mistake is trying to eliminate contraction instead of listening to it. Discomfort is not telling you to stop. It is telling you to stop forcing. When reality reorganizes around a new internal frequency, the first thing that destabilizes is predictability. Patterns you relied on stop working. Reactions that once made sense feel hollow. Motivation rises and falls unpredictably. This is not regression. This is recalibration. The system is updating its reference point. The field is responding to who you are becoming, not who you were. And that process cannot look orderly to an identity that is dissolving. The mind interprets disruption as danger because it equates familiarity with safety. But consciousness knows better. Consciousness recognizes expansion even when the surface feels unstable. That is why something in you remains calm beneath the turbulence. That quiet presence is not denial. It is recognition. It knows that what is collapsing was never meant to be permanent. It knows that the discomfort is temporary, but the alignment is structural. This is where many people retreat. They mistake intensity for error and try to return to what no longer fits. But you cannot undo recognition. Once a frequency shift has begun, going backward creates more friction than moving forward. This is why allowing is not passive. Allowing is intelligent participation. It is the decision to stop gripping the old framework and let the new one assemble itself through you. If this reframing is landing, it means you are already stabilizing. Awareness is stabilization. Understanding the process reduces resistance. Resistance is what prolongs suffering, not the change itself. When you stop fighting the disruption, it starts resolving on its own. The field responds immediately to allowance. This changes everything. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. Coincidence ends when coherence begins. What people call synchronicity is not the universe trying to get your attention. It is the universe responding to it. When internal alignment reaches a certain threshold, timelines that were once distant begin to converge. Events compress. Symbols repeat. Messages echo across different channels. This is not magic. This is mechanics. Reality is reorganizing around a clarified identity, and the signal becomes impossible to ignore. Repeated signs are not encouragements to keep waiting. They are confirmations that waiting is over. Waiting energy is passive, hopeful, and externally oriented. It asks for proof before commitment. Readiness energy is different. It is present, grounded, and internally decisive. It does not ask when. It asks how clearly can I be here now. When readiness energy activates, the field responds immediately because the signal is stable. The universe does not reward patience. It responds to coherence. This is why synchronicities accelerate right before a breakthrough. The delay collapses because the internal contradiction collapses. As long as you are divided between becoming and staying, reality mirrors that division as pauses, detours, and near misses. Once that division resolves, even quietly, the pauses disappear. Momentum returns without effort. Doors open without persuasion. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped oscillating. The present moment is the lock-in point. Creation does not happen in anticipation or regret. It happens only now. When you choose presence over postponement, the timeline finalizes itself. This is not about making a dramatic decision or forcing clarity. It is about no longer deferring alignment. The moment you stop asking for signs and start responding to what is already being shown, the system registers commitment. And commitment collapses delay. Many people misinterpret synchronicity as a message to keep analyzing. In truth, it is a signal that analysis is complete. The field has already adjusted. The question is whether you will adjust with it or resist the update. Resistance does not stop the process. It only stretches it. Allowing lets the convergence complete itself naturally. You may notice that opportunities now appear closer together, that conversations feel pointed, that random encounters carry weight. This is because the timeline has narrowed. There are fewer variables. Fewer detours. The path does not feel chosen anymore. It feels obvious. That obviousness is not boredom. It is precision. Precision replaces possibility when readiness is achieved. There is nothing you need to chase at this stage. Chasing would reintroduce waiting energy. The only requirement is to stay present and honest with yourself. Notice what no longer feels optional. Notice what feels inevitable rather than exciting. That inevitability is alignment. When something feels unavoidable, it is because it is already selected. The collapse of delay is not loud. It is subtle and decisive. It feels like a quiet internal click. A sense that the question has changed from if to now. When that happens, coincidence ends because you are no longer fragmented. Reality mirrors that unity immediately. This is how timelines converge. This is how breakthroughs move from potential to lived experience. This phase is often misunderstood because it does not feel like progress in the way the mind expects. This is not a phase of improvement or optimization. It is the phase where the old self can no longer survive. Not because it is wrong, but because it is no longer coherent with who you are becoming. A breakthrough phase is not about adding something new. It is about removing what can no longer be sustained. Timelines are not destinations in the future. They are expressions of identity in the present. Every version of you exists as a frequency, and reality responds by reflecting the version you are most consistently inhabiting. As long as an identity is fed by attention, emotion, and belief, its timeline continues. When attention withdraws, the timeline dissolves. This is why true change cannot be partial. You cannot live in two identities at once without friction. The field does not respond to compromise. It responds to coherence. Partial transformation fails because it tries to preserve familiarity while asking for new outcomes. It wants the benefits of alignment without the cost of release. But reality cannot reorganize around a self that is undecided. Indecision is a frequency, and it produces delay. The breakthrough phase begins when the internal contradiction becomes too uncomfortable to maintain. When who you have been and who you are becoming can no longer coexist peacefully, something has to give. That giving way is often misinterpreted as loss. Old habits lose their grip. Old motivations stop working. Old narratives no longer explain your experience. This is not collapse for its own sake. It is replacement. The present moment becomes the only viable anchor because the past identity no longer has energy, and the future identity cannot be imagined clearly yet. Presence becomes survival. And presence is creation. The present moment replaces the old self entirely because identity only exists now. There is no past self operating anywhere except in memory. There is no future self operating anywhere except in projection. The only self that can generate a timeline is the one you are being right now. When you stop rehearsing the past and stop negotiating with the future, the old identity loses its reference point. It fades not through effort, but through irrelevance. This is why forcing change backfires. Force keeps the old identity alive by fighting it. Allowing lets it dissolve by removing resistance. Control creates tension because it assumes something must be held together. Allowing creates flow because it trusts the reorganization. The breakthrough phase asks for surrender, not as weakness, but as precision. Precision knows when to stop interfering. You may notice that you no longer relate to your own past decisions, fears, or ambitions. This is not confusion. It is disengagement. The old self is no longer driving. And because identity is shifting at the root, external reality must follow, even if there is a temporary lag. That lag is not delay. It is recalibration. Nothing is wrong with you in this phase. Nothing needs to be fixed. Something is being replaced. When the old self can no longer survive, it is because it has completed its function. The breakthrough phase is not the beginning of something new. It is the end of something that no longer matches your frequency. And once that ending is acknowledged, the new Timmel INE stabilizes on its own. What you are feeling now is not instability. It is compression. Emotional compression happens when an old identity and a new identity briefly occupy the same internal space. The frequency tightens. Sensations intensify. Thoughts feel louder or more fragmented. This is not because something is wrong, but because something is consolidating. When timelines converge, the emotional body experiences pressure the same way matter does when it changes state. During an identity transition, emotions amplify because they are carrying more information per moment. This is why you may feel everything at once or nothing clearly at all. The system is processing at a higher resolution. What once unfolded gradually is now condensed. Compression is efficiency, not overload. It is the field accelerating integration because you are ready to hold it. This is also why this phase feels like the point of no return. Once compression begins, expansion is inevitable. You cannot uncompress consciousness by will. You can only slow the process by resisting it. Resistance increases friction. Allowance releases it. Allowance does not mean liking what you feel. It means letting the feeling move without labeling it as a problem. Contraction and expansion are not moral judgments. They are guidance signals. Expansion feels like relief, clarity, openness, or quiet confidence. Contraction feels like anxiety, frustration, sadness, or heaviness. Both are useful. Expansion shows you what aligns. Contraction shows you where something is no longer true. The mistake is trying to eliminate contraction instead of listening to it. Contraction is not telling you to stop becoming. It is telling you to stop carrying what no longer belongs in the new identity. Emotional compression intensifies when you attempt to manage the process mentally. The mind wants to categorize, predict, and control. But identity shifts are not intellectual events. They are energetic ones. Control collapses the system inward. Allowing lets it reorganize outward. When you soften your grip and let emotions pass through without interpretation, the compression begins to resolve naturally. You may notice waves. Moments of certainty followed by moments of doubt. Surges of clarity followed by fatigue. This is not regression. This is recalibration. The system is testing coherence. Each wave integrates another layer. Each contraction releases another attachment. Each expansion confirms alignment. The signal of no return is not intensity itself. It is the loss of interest in going back. Even when this phase is uncomfortable, something in you knows that returning to the old way would feel worse. This is why this phase does not ask for effort. It asks for honesty. What are you still holding that tightens you? What are you still forcing that could be allowed? Emotional compression points directly to the answer. The body already knows. The field is already responding. Your role is not to fix the process, but to stop interrupting it. If you want to anchor this shift consciously, comment with the words, "I am ready to anchor th." Is timeline. The universe applies pressure because pressure is precise. Comfort preserves what already exists. Pressure reorganizes what no longer fits. When an identity has reached the end of its usefulness, comfort would only delay the inevitable. Growth at this level is non-negotiable because it is not personal development. It is structural realignment. The field is not trying to motivate you. It is enforcing coherence. Pressure appears when the gap between who you are being and who you are becoming becomes too wide to ignore. As long as that gap exists, reality mirrors it as tension. Situations tighten. Options narrow. Repetition intensifies. This is not cruelty. This is feedback. The universe does not negotiate with misalignment. It responds to frequency. When frequency shifts, pressure emerges to remove what no longer matches it. Comfort would reinforce the old identity because comfort rewards familiarity. Familiarity keeps patterns alive even when they are no longer true. If the universe softened this phase, you would remain attached to versions of yourself that cannot accompany you forward. That attachment is what creates suffering, not the pressure itself. Pressure only exposes the attachment. It does not create it. Contrast is the refining agent. Without contrast, desire remains vague and identity remains diffuse. Contrast sharpens alignment by revealing what you are not. Every uncomfortable situation in this phase is showing you a boundary. Every moment of frustration is clarifying what you will no longer carry. This is refinement, not punishment. The system is eliminating noise so the signal can stabilize. Most resistance comes from misunderstanding pressure as opposition. In reality, pressure is assistance without sentimentality. It does not soothe the ego. It serves coherence. When you stop asking why things are hard and start asking what is being refined, the process becomes intelligible. Intelligibility reduces resistance. Reduced resistance allows flow. Flow resolves pressure. Allowing is the only path through this phase because allowing removes the internal friction that magnifies pressure into suffering. Allowing does not mean giving up. It means releasing the attempt to control the shape of the transition. Control tries to preserve the old structure while moving forward. That is impossible. Allowing lets the old structure dissolve so the new one can assemble cleanly. You may notice that when you stop fighting a situation, it either resolves quickly or reveals its true purpose. Pressure only persists when it is resisted. When its lesson is integrated, it loses its function. This is why some challenges vanish the moment you stop struggling with them. They were never obstacles. They were adjustment mechanisms. Non-negotiable growth does not mean constant intensity. It means inevitability. The pressure will not stop until alignment is restored because misalignment is unstable by nature. The universe seeks equilibrium. Equilibrium is not comfort. It is balance. Balance feels calm only after coherence is achieved. If this phase feels relentless, it is because you are close. Pressure increases near completion because fewer variables remain. The system is finalizing. What remains is not to endure more, but to interfere less. Stop bracing. Stop negotiating. Let the refinement complete itself. Pressure is not the enemy of peace. It is the process that clears the path to it. There is a phase in every real breakthrough that feels like a disappearance. This is the internal collapse phase, and it arrives after pressure has done its work. The mind expects relief to look like excitement or certainty, but instead it encounters quiet. Motivation drops. Emotional noise fades. The world feels distant. This is not a problem to solve. It is a system reformatting itself. Silence appears when the old identity has released its grip but the new one has not fully stabilized yet. The personality no longer knows how to perform itself. The familiar scripts go offline. This creates a sensation of emptiness that is often misinterpreted as depression. But depression pulls you downward into meaninglessness. This silence pulls you inward into neutrality. There is a difference. One collapses energy. The other redistributes it. Detachment during this phase is structural, not emotional withdrawal. You are not becoming numb. You are becoming unhooked. Things that once triggered you no longer land the same way. Conversations feel flatter. Achievements feel hollow. Even desires go quiet. This is because the system has stopped feeding the old reward loops. The identity that required stimulation to feel real is dissolving. What remains is presence without narrative. The mind struggles here because it wants momentum. It wants proof that something is happening. But alignment does not announce itself with motion. It announces itself with stillness. Stillness is the point at which the system stops oscillating. It is the pause where coherence locks in. If you try to escape this silence, you interrupt the integration. If you label it as wrong, you reintroduce resistance. Presence is the stabilizer in this phase. Not effort. Not analysis. Presence means allowing the quiet without trying to fill it. It means letting the lack of direction exist without forcing a new one prematurely. This is not passivity. It is precision. The field is recalibrating reference points. Any attempt to rush forward would be based on the old structure and would need to be undone later. You may notice that time feels strange here. Days blur. The sense of urgency dissolves. This is because the system is no longer driven by external clocks. It is aligning internally. When alignment locks in, action returns naturally. But it returns cleanly, without anxiety. Without overthinking. Without self-negotiation. Many people abandon this phase too early. They mistake silence for stagnation and try to recreate intensity. They seek distraction, stimulation, or drama just to feel alive again. This delays stabilization. The silence is not emptiness. It is space. Space is required for anything new to form. The universe cannot install a new operating system while the old one is still running in the background. If you let this phase complete itself, something subtle happens. The quiet becomes grounded rather than hollow. The emptiness becomes spacious rather than uncomfortable. You begin to feel held by something deeper than emotion. That is alignment settling into place. Nothing needs to be decided here. Nothing needs to be fixed. The silence is doing the work. Your only role is to remain present long enough for the lock in to occur. What is happening now is not a loss of passion. It is a relocation of identity. When you begin losing interest in what once defined you, it is not because you are becoming empty. It is because the center of gravity has moved. The roles, desires, and relationships that once gave you a sense of self no longer supply energy because they were feeding an identity that is no longer active. Identity migration is subtle but decisive. It does not announce itself with rejection or anger. It arrives as indifference. What once felt urgent now feels optional. What once felt meaningful now feels heavy. This is not a failure to appreciate life. It is the nervous system withdrawing investment from structures that cannot accompany you forward. Energy follows identity. When identity shifts, attention follows. And what no longer receives attention begins to fade. This phase often brings grief, but it is a quiet grief. Not the grief of losing something you still want, but the grief of realizing you have already outgrown it. That grief deserves respect, not dramatization. Romanticizing suffering keeps you attached to what is dissolving. Suppressing grief denies the intelligence of the process. The middle path is acknowledgement without attachment. You can honor what something gave you without trying to carry it into a future where it does not belong. Old desires fall away first because they are the most identity-linked. Desire is not random. It is a signal of who you believe yourself to be. When belief changes, desire updates. This is why forcing yourself to want what you used to want feels exhausting. It is not a lack of discipline. It is honesty emerging. Authenticity requires letting go of desires that no longer arise naturally. Roles dissolve next. The way you showed up for others, the masks you wore to be understood, the responsibilities you carried to maintain belonging. These roles do not disappear because you are becoming selfish. They disappear because they were compensatory. They existed to stabilize an identity that needed validation. As that need dissolves, the role loses its function. Relationships are the most sensitive part of this phase. Some connections feel distant not because anything went wrong, but because resonance has changed. Trying to maintain closeness through obligation only creates strain. Authenticity requires allowing distance when distance is honest. This does not mean cutting people off. It means stopping the performance that kept the relationship alive artificially. Attachment resists identity migration by clinging to familiarity. Authenticity allows migration by trusting coherence. You do not need to burn bridges or make declarations. Withdrawal of interest is already a declaration. Silence is already a signal. The field reorganizes around truth without confrontation when you let it. This phase is not asking you to replace what is leaving immediately. Space must come before clarity. If you rush to fill the gap, you install substitutes instead of alignment. Let the emptiness breathe. It is not emptiness. It is availability. You are not losing yourself. You are losing what you used to use to define yourself. That distinction matters. When identity migrates fully, new desires will emerge naturally, without force. New roles will feel obvious rather than obligatory. New connections will feel reciprocal rather than effortful. Nothing that is truly aligned is being taken from you. What is leaving has already completed its function. The task now is not to mourn endlessly, but to allow the migration to complete without dragging the past forward. There comes a moment when the questions fall away. Not because everything has been answered, but because the need to ask dissolves. Seeking ends when coherence begins. You stop scanning the world for confirmation and start listening to what is already stable within you. This shift is subtle, but it is decisive. It marks the transition from reaction to authority. Seeking is driven by fragmentation. It happens when different parts of you are pulling in different directions and you are trying to reconcile them through external input. Advice, signs, validation, reassurance. These are not wrong, but they belong to an earlier phase. When identity stabilizes, the internal signal strengthens. The noise fades. You are no longer compelled to check whether you are aligned. You can feel it. Quiet certainty does not arrive with excitement. It arrives with neutrality. A grounded sense of knowing that does not need to announce itself. It does not argue. It does not persuade. It does not rush. It simply is. This is why it can be mistaken for indifference or detachment. But underneath that calm is precision. Precision is what replaces urgency when coherence becomes the baseline. Intuition takes over when validation becomes unnecessary. Not because you have become infallible, but because you are no longer split. When you are internally aligned, intuition does not feel mystical. It feels obvious. Decisions make themselves. You know when to move and when to wait without mental debate. This is not because you have more information. It is because you have less contradiction. Authority emerges here, but it does not look like control. It looks like self-trust without performance. You stop explaining your choices to people who cannot feel what you feel. You stop adjusting your truth to make it palatable. You do not become rigid. You become clear. Clarity removes the need for defense. Coherence as authority means your internal state sets the reference point. Emotions still move, but they do not destabilize you. External opinions still exist, but they do not redirect you. You are not immune to influence. You are simply no longer dependent on it. This is the difference between confidence and coherence. Confidence can collapse under pressure. Coherence deepens. You may notice that fewer things feel like options now. This is not limitation. It is alignment. When coherence stabilizes, the path narrows naturally. Not because you are trapped, but because ambiguity dissolves. The next step becomes self-evident. You do not need to weigh it against 10 alternatives. You feel its fit immediately. This phase often feels anticlimactic to the mind. There is no dramatic revelation. No external applause. But something profound has shifted. You are no longer negotiating with yourself. That internal negotiation was the source of exhaustion. Its absence creates quiet power. Knowing does not mean certainty about outcomes. It means certainty about direction. You may not know how everything will unfold, but you know what is no longer true. You know what you will no longer do. You know where you will not compromise. That is enough. From here, movement becomes clean. Action arises without force. Rest happens without guilt. The breakthrough no longer feels like something you are approaching. It feels like something you are standing in. After the internal collapse completes, something stabilizes quietly. There is no announcement. No dramatic shift that the outside world applauds. Instead, there is a sense of internal grounding, as if the pieces have finally settled into place. This is post-collapse stabilization. The system has finished recalibrating, and for the first time in a long while, you are no longer pushing against yourself. That internal truce is what allows the external world to begin responding differently. When identity coherence is restored, effort loses its function. Not because action stops, but because force is no longer required. Force was compensating for fragmentation. You were trying to move forward while parts of you were still resisting. Now that resistance has dissolved, movement becomes natural. The field responds to this immediately. Reality does not wait for proof. It mirrors state. You may notice that things begin to meet you halfway. Conversations unfold with less friction. Opportunities arise without strategizing. Solutions appear without searching. This is not because the world has suddenly become generous. It is because you are no longer broadcasting mixed signals. Coherence simplifies the signal. A clean signal is easy to respond to. Effort dissolves into receptivity at this stage. Receptivity is not passivity. It is availability without grasping. You are present enough to notice what aligns and grounded enough not to chase what doesn't. This creates a magnetic quality. You are not pulling outcomes toward you. You are allowing the field to organize around your clarity. This is often where people become suspicious. They expect ease to be temporary or undeserved. But ease is not a reward. It is a byproduct of alignment. When there is no internal contradiction, reality does not need to create friction to get your attention. Friction was instructional. Now the lesson has been integrated. The world responds without effort because you are no longer trying to extract something from it. You are no longer approaching life as a problem to solve. You are participating from presence rather than projection. This changes the timing of everything. Delays shorten. Detours disappear. What once required persistence now requires discernment. Discernment replaces hustle. You do less, but what you do carries more weight. This is not because you are trying to be efficient. It is because alignment removes waste. You stop investing energy in what does not respond. You stop explaining yourself to spaces that cannot receive you. The system conserves energy automatically when coherence is high. You may also notice that setbacks no longer destabilize you. They register as information, not threats. Because your identity is no longer dependent on outcomes, outcomes lose their power to define you. This paradoxically allows them to resolve more easily. The field responds best to non-attachment, not indifference, but grounded openness. This phase does not mean everything becomes perfect. It means everything becomes honest. What aligns moves smoothly. What does not align reveals itself quickly. There is less drama because there is less denial. Reality feels responsive because you are responsive to yourself. Nothing here needs to be maintained through effort. The moment you start forcing again, friction will return as feedback. Alignment is self-sustaining when you let it be. The world is not suddenly cooperating with you. It is simply no longer correcting you. Authority does not announce itself when it is real. It does not raise its voice or sharpen its edges. It does not push, convince, or dominate. True authority emerges when internal coherence becomes so stable that it sets the tone of the space without effort. This is authority without assertion, and it operates through resonance, not control. Control is loud because it is compensatory. It tries to manage outcomes, reactions, and perceptions. Resonant authority does none of this. It does not need to. When your internal state is aligned, the field adjusts automatically. People feel it before they understand it. Environments respond without instruction. Situations reorganize without confrontation. This is not charisma. It is coherence being reflected. Presence is the primary instrument here. Not performative presence, but grounded awareness. When you are fully present, you are not leaking attention into anticipation or regret. Your energy is contained. Containment creates gravity. Gravity influences without motion. This is why people often feel calmer, more focused, or more exposed around you without knowing why. Your presence becomes a stabilizing reference point. Silence plays a critical role at this stage. Silence is not absence. It is signal density. When you no longer feel compelled to fill space with explanation, your words gain weight. Silence allows others to encounter themselves. It removes distraction. In that quiet, truth surfaces. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable to some people. It reflects without distortion. Emotional witnessing deepens this authority. Witnessing means allowing emotions to move through you without identification or suppression. You feel fully, but you do not collapse into what you feel. This creates emotional stability, which is rare. Most environments are reactive. When you are not reacting, you introduce a new rhythm. That rhythm invites recalibration. This form of authority never tries to fix people. Fixing implies superiority and resistance. Witnessing implies equality and safety. When people feel seen without being managed, they regulate themselves. Conversations shift. Tension dissolves. Defensive behaviors soften. Not because you asked them to change, but because your state made another option available. It is important to understand that this authority is not passive. It is precise. You may speak less, but when you do, it lands. You may intervene rarely, but when you do, it matters. This is because action is no longer driven by anxiety or urgency. It is driven by alignment. Aligned action carries authority naturally. You may notice that you no longer need to prove competence, justify boundaries, or explain decisions. Not because others always agree, but because you no longer require agreement to remain grounded. That self-containment is felt immediately. It discourages manipulation and invites respect without demand. Authority without assertion also changes how conflict appears. Conflict does not escalate because it finds no fuel. You do not mirror agitation. You do not personalize projection. You remain present. Presence absorbs without absorbing damage. This is not avoidance. It is mastery. This stage is not about becoming influential. Influence is a side effect. The core shift is internal. You trust your coherence enough to let it speak for itself. You stop managing impressions and start honoring alignment. And alignment, when sustained, recalibrates everything it touches with ho. Saying a word. As alignment stabilizes, relationships reorganize without drama. This is not because you have become distant or selective in a calculated way. It is because resonance has changed. Resonance is the invisible agreement between frequencies. When it shifts, proximity adjusts naturally. This is resonance-based sorting, and it operates without intention or blame. Some people fall away not because anything went wrong, but because the energetic contract has expired. The connection was sustained by an identity you no longer inhabit. When that identity dissolves, the relationship loses its anchor. Conversations feel strained. Shared interests thin out. Effort increases. This is not a failure of loyalty. It is an indication that coherence is doing its work. Release in this phase is often effortless. There is no confrontation, no dramatic ending, no need for explanation. Distance simply forms. Contact decreases. The emotional charge fades. This is not avoidance. It is honesty without performance. When alignment is high, misalignment does not require rejection. It resolves through non-engagement. Guilt often arises here, but it is misplaced. Guilt assumes responsibility for another person's resonance. You are not responsible for maintaining connections that no longer reflect who you are. Holding on to relationships out of obligation reintroduces fragmentation. Authenticity requires allowing what no longer fits to complete its cycle. At the same time, new connections begin to appear without pursuit. These are not necessarily instant bonds or dramatic encounters. Often they arrive quietly. A conversation that feels unusually easy. A sense of recognition without history. An exchange that requires no explanation. These connections form because resonance attracts without effort. You are no longer searching for belonging. You are available for alignment. These new connections do not demand energy to maintain. There is reciprocity without negotiation. Presence without performance. You are not trying to be understood. Understanding is implicit. This is how you know the connection is aligned. It does not need constant validation. It does not drain you. It does not require you to be someone else. It is important not to rush this process. If you try to replace what is leaving too quickly, you may replicate old patterns. Space is part of sorting. Space allows resonance to reveal itself clearly. Trust the pauses. Trust the quiet intervals between connections. They are calibrating you. You may notice that some people reappear briefly during this phase. This is not reversal. It is resolution. Old dynamics surface to be completed, not resumed. Completion does not always require conversation. Sometimes it requires recognition and release. Once acknowledged, the loop closes. Resonance-based sorting is not judgment. It is alignment in motion. You are not becoming isolated. You are becoming precise. Precision feels lonely only when compared to indiscriminate connection. But indiscriminate connection is no longer sustainable for you. As this process completes, your relational field becomes cleaner. Fewer connections, more depth. Less noise, more truth. This is not about exclusivity. It is about coherence. When you allow relationships to sort themselves naturally, you conserve energy and stabilize alignment. Nothing that is truly aligned will require you to chase it or hold it together by force. What remains does so because it fits. What leaves does so because it no longer does. Trust the intelligence of this movement. It is the same elegance that brought you this far. There is a point where embodiment replaces effort. This is where living stops feeling like something you have to push yourself into and starts feeling like something that moves through you naturally. Motivation fades not because you have become passive, but because it is no longer necessary. Motivation is a tool for misalignment. It exists to force action when identity and behavior are not yet in agreement. When identity stabilizes, action no longer needs to be summoned. It arises. You do not need to convince yourself to move. You do not need external pressure, deadlines, or emotional urgency. What you do aligns with who you are, and that alignment generates momentum on its own. This is not discipline-driven living. It is identity-led creation. Discipline relies on resistance. It assumes something in you does not want to move and must be trained, managed, or overridden. Alignment removes that assumption. When your actions are expressions of your identity, resistance dissolves. You rest when rest is aligned. You act when action is aligned. There is no guilt in either state because neither is a failure to perform. Both are correct responses to the present moment. Rest becomes intelligent here. Not escape. Not avoidance. Rest becomes part of creation. When you are aligned, rest replenishes clarity instead of dulling it. Presence deepens instead of drifting. You stop equating productivity with worth. Worth is no longer negotiated through output. It is inherent in coherence. Presence replaces pressure. Instead of asking what you should be doing, you notice what is arising. Instead of forcing progress, you respond to what is ready. This makes life feel slower on the surface but far more efficient underneath. Fewer actions. Cleaner outcomes. Less energy wasted correcting misaligned moves. Identity-led creation does not mean you never challenge yourself. It means challenge comes from truth rather than fear. You stretch because something wants to express itself, not because you are trying to prove value. This distinction changes everything. Actions taken from fear drain you. Actions taken from alignment feed you. You may notice that your days become simpler. Fewer internal arguments. Fewer false starts. Decisions feel obvious instead of heavy. This is not because life has become smaller. It is because noise has been removed. When identity is clear, complexity collapses naturally. Motivation-based living is volatile. It spikes and crashes. Alignment-based living is stable. It does not rely on emotional highs. It does not collapse during low-energy days. It adapts without self-judgment. This creates sustainability. You stop burning yourself to stay in motion. This phase also changes how you relate to time. Urgency dissolves. You no longer feel behind. You move when movement is correct, not when anxiety demands it. This does not slow outcomes. It accelerates them by eliminating resistance. The field responds best to clean signals, not frantic ones. A life that no longer requires motivation is not dull. It is grounded. It is precise. It is responsive rather than reactive. You stop managing yourself and start trusting the intelligence of alignment. And when identity leads, effort follows only where it belongs. You are no longer trying to become someone. You are allowing who you are to move freely. When you are aligned, influence stops being something you attempt and becomes something that happens. This is the subtle power most people never recognize because it does not announce itself. It does not persuade, correct, or perform. It simply emanates. Coherence reshapes environments the way a tuning fork reshapes sound, not by effort, but by presence. Every system responds to a dominant frequency. When your internal state is consistent, calm, and grounded, it becomes a reference point. Others may not know why they feel different around you, but they do. Conversations slow. Reactivity softens. Truth surfaces without interrogation. This is not because you are teaching. It is because your coherence gives others permission to settle into theirs. Ripple effects are rarely immediate or dramatic. They move quietly through moments that seem insignificant. A boundary you hold without explanation. A reaction you do not have. A choice you make without justification. These moments recalibrate the field. People adjust unconsciously. Patterns shift without confrontation. What once required words now happens through resonance. This is why aligned presence can feel unsettling to those who are fragmented. It mirrors without accusation. It exposes without attack. Some will feel drawn to it. Others will feel irritated by it. Neither response is personal. Both are reflections. You are not responsible for managing how your coherence is received. You are responsible for maintaining it. A tuning fork does not chase sound. It vibrates, and sound adjusts. When you stop trying to convince, save, or awaken others, your influence becomes cleaner. Forcing creates resistance. Preaching creates hierarchy. Proving creates defensiveness. Alignment creates invitation. Invitation allows choice. Choice creates real change. You may notice that people begin to confide in you without knowing why. Or that conflicts resolve faster in your presence. Or that chaos settles when you enter a room. These are not achievements. They are byproducts. They happen because coherence stabilizes unstable systems. The field seeks equilibrium, and alignment offers it. This power is subtle because it is not emotional. It does not rely on passion or intensity. It relies on consistency. Consistency over time reshapes more than bursts of force ever could. This is why staying aligned matters more than making statements. Your being is the message. You do not need to explain your values. They are felt. You do not need to defend your choices. They are evident. You do not need to correct others. Your presence introduces another option naturally. Those who are ready will feel it. Those who are not will move away. Both outcomes are correct. The temptation at this stage is to underestimate what is happening because it feels ordinary. You are simply living your life. But ordinary alignment is rare. Most environments are driven by unconscious tension. When you are not contributing to that tension, you are already changing the atmosphere. This is how coherence reshapes environments without force. It does not confront distortion. It makes distortion uncomfortable by no longer participating in it. Over time, systems either adapt or dissolve. People either rise or retreat. You do not have to manage this. You only have to remain true. The subtle power of being aligned is that it requires nothing extra from you. No effort. No performance. No role. Just consistency. And consistency, when rooted in truth, becomes the most transformative influence there is. This is no longer preparation. Preparation implies a future moment where life begins, where clarity arrives, where permission is granted. That moment has already passed. The breakthrough phase is not approaching. It is active. And once it begins, it cannot be undone. Not because you are trapped, but because recognition cannot be reversed. You have seen too much. You have felt too clearly. The old way of relating to yourself and reality no longer holds. Seeking belongs to a different phase. Seeking assumes something is missing. Embodiment knows that nothing is missing, only unexpressed. At this stage, the work is not to gather more insight or refine more concepts. It is to live as what you already recognize yourself to be. Identity now leads. Effort follows only where it is aligned. This is the inversion that changes everything. The temptation here is to delay embodiment by calling it integration, patience, or humility. But delay is no longer neutral. It creates friction because the system is already organized around a new reference point. When you continue to act as if you are still preparing, reality responds with discomfort. Not as punishment, but as correction. The field is consistent. It mirrors who you are being now, not who you intend to be later. Embodiment does not require grand gestures. It requires consistency. It asks that your choices reflect your clarity. That your boundaries reflect your truth. That your pace reflects your presence rather than your fear. This is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about stopping the performance of being incomplete. Identity over effort means you no longer try to force outcomes that contradict your alignment. You stop negotiating with environments that require you to shrink. You stop explaining yourself to spaces that cannot receive you. This is not withdrawal. It is precision. Precision conserves energy. Energy conserved becomes coherence. Coherence stabilizes timelines. There may still be moments of doubt, fatigue, or uncertainty. These do not negate the breakthrough. They humanize it. Embodiment does not mean perfection. It means honesty. You no longer abandon yourself to maintain comfort. You no longer override your knowing to preserve familiarity. This is the real threshold. And crossing it changes how reality responds to you permanently. From here, life will continue to refine you, but it will do so from alignment rather than conflict. Challenges will arise, but they will no longer question your direction. They will sharpen it. You are no longer trying to arrive somewhere else. You are learning how to remain coherent where you are. This is why nothing about this feels optional anymore. You can feel the difference between what fits and what doesn't instantly. That sensitivity is not fragility. It is alignment awareness. And once awareness is integrated, it becomes responsibility. Not to others, but to yourself. This is the end of rehearsal. The end of waiting. The end of asking when your life will begin. It has already begun, and it is responding to you now. The only question left is whether you will meet it as who you are or retreat into who you no longer are. If this has activated you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.